Going off to college is the bridge between childhood and adulthood. It's meant to ease you into living into the real world on your own, without your parents. Of course, there's a bit of an adjustment period because suddenly being completely responsible for everything in your life can be a lot for some to handle. For others, the adjustment is a breeze. For the most part, after a month or so, everyone seems to be adjusting and thriving to their new semi adult environment. Or do they? Currently, 73% of college students say they are overwhelmed. 29% say they have failed a class because of mental health issues. Welcome back to Justice 4. We're your hosts. I'm Jackie.
And I'm Sam.
The first time I heard about this case was on a podcast a few years ago, and it stuck with me. Also, I'm not going to lie. I totally made all my judgments about this case based off of that podcast. I didn't do any other research at the time. I know. Shame on me. Recently, this case popped back in my head randomly, and when I went to Google it, so I could add it to our ever-growing list of cases to come back to and to dive more into, I found a major update in this case, which shocked me because when I had heard that podcast a few years ago, trial was done, sentence was handed out, we were in jail. So what could have changed?
I feel like that's a big thing, though, is that, like, you go and listen to a podcast, and if, depending on how long it is, you're just like, this person did their research, they got out all of it, and they're telling us everything that is out there. So, of course, we're going to make our judgments and first impressions based off of everything that this specific person or podcast told us.
Oh, and it was a long episode. It was a deep dive.
Yeah. Why wouldn't we trust these people who do this for a living? You know?
Yeah.
So I understand it being your first thought, like your thoughts on it.
Yeah.
You said it came from updates, right? So the
podcast was done right after the trial was over.
Okay.
So we had sentencings and everything. This update I read just happened in December of 2024.
We're doing so much with recent things.
So
You're welcome.
As I started researching this case, I realized that I definitely should have done my own research back then. Not that the episode was wrong. It was just extremely skewed to one side. And there's also nothing wrong with that. But I had a lot of preconceived notions. I had thoughts. And while those thoughts are actually there and valid, they're not as strong, and it's not what it was. So on that note, we're human. We can only do so much, and we're bound to miss something from time to time.
Yeah.
So we love it when y'all let us know. We try to give you every piece of information, and when we can't find that, or we think it might be wrong, or there's multiple stories, we let you guys know so you can research it as well. Please.
I feel like we're pretty good about that.
Yes. And also, please research our episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. If we miss something, which, again, we're human. We miss things. But we are not ever going to be those people that if we got something wrong or anything like that, we're not going to fight you. We're going to thank you for, one, telling us we're wrong, and two, maybe put an update out there if needed.
Yes, we will always make sure that we have the right facts. And
absolutely. We want to present you with the right facts, not just whatever we feel like. We ain't those people, you know?
Yeah. So, let's get down to it.
Let's do it.
Buckle up, y'all, for the tragic death of Brenda Powell. Buckled.
Ready.
Brenda Powell was born on March 19, 1969 in Salem, Ohio. She was described as a very sweet and respectful child. Brenda's mom, Elizabeth, said that the only time she got in trouble was when she was trying to stop her brother from getting in trouble. She would get right in between her mom and her brother and tell her, "Don't yell at him. He didn't do it.
Listen, Lizzie."
Yes. Yes. She never even yelled at anyone. Not even her mom. They never really even fought either.
Nice.
She grew up attending Catholic schools. She loved school. In fact, she excelled at it. She went on to graduate from the University of Akron with honors. She got her degree in early childhood education. Brenda went to work at Akron Children's Hospital as a child life specialist in hematology oncology.
Nice.
She worked with kids and teens who have blood and cancer disorders. Brenda quickly fell in love with this job. She cared so much for her patients and always tried to think outside the box to help them in any way she could. She created the Oncology Teen Program and really wanted to make these teenagers feel normal while living a very not normal life. She would throw proms, she'd take the kids bowling, plan activities for the families. She never wanted these kids to feel alone for 1 minute. She always found herself leaving family functions on holidays, especially Christmas Eve, to head back to the hospital.
Aw,
Because she just missed her kids. Her
That's
hospital
sweet.
kids.
that's really sweet.
With Brenda devoting all her time and energy to her career and the kids at the hospital, she wasn't really interested in settling down. That is, until her friends set her up on a date with Steve Powell.
Oh.
Apparently, some mutual friends of the two thought they would be perfect for each other. Turns out they were right, because 1 year after their first date, 27-year-old Brenda and 30-year-old Steve got married in 1996.
I'm sorry, 1 year?
Yep, 1 year after their date. Yes.
Hell yeah. Hell
And
yeah.
I said 1996, right? So think of them weddings from back then. It was a
Girl.
big wedding.
I feel it. I'm pretty sure my mom got married in 96 or 97. The poof balls.
The puff.
All of the poof. The puff. Amazing.
They had so many people at their wedding that they each had 7 bridesmaids and 7 groomsmen. It like kind of reminds me of like your wedding. Like we had
That's
so many of
essentially
us.
Basically
Yeah.
my wedding. I had a very large wedding. We had a very big wedding.
Yeah. So it was kind of similar. Like it reminded me of that. Steve and Brenda, they were enjoying their careers and being young and married, so they didn't have kids for a few years. In March of 2000, Brenda gave birth to their daughter Sydney, and 3 years later, in September of 2003, they welcomed their son Andrew.
Nice.
Brenda loved being a mom. I swear she was superhuman or something because she stayed dedicated to her patients at the hospital while attending every school activity and sport for Sydney and Andrew. And when I say every one of them, I mean it. She never missed anything at all.
Good on her.
Brenda also loved going to Disney. So every summer they took a family vacation to either Disney World or the beach.
Oh, that's your kind of
Oh,
friend right there.
was she my kind of mom? She was my kind of mom. I mean, adamant. And these
Yeah.
weren't just like Sydney, Andrew, Steve, and Brenda. Oh no. Brenda was like, Mom, let's go. Oh yeah, all of it. Grandparents were coming, family, friends. Disney's the time for everybody. They were all just very close to each other and loved doing things together. I mean, when I say that this was a very, very close, tight family, they were. Brenda and Sydney were practically inseparable from the day she was born. The only time they were ever really apart was when Brenda was at work or Sydney was at school, which wasn't a surprise for Steve. Sydney was a mini version of Brenda. Her personality, her attitude, all of it was Brenda. Sydney, like her mom, went to Catholic schools growing up. She was a sweet and respectful child like her mom was. But unlike her mom, Sydney would worry a lot, and this started at a young age. Brenda was great at dealing with worry. It was her literal job. Sydney really looked up to her mom and admired her. She wanted to be just like her, kind, caring, always putting others first. They never argued or fought. Steve was absolutely amazed by this. Even throughout Sydney's teen years, her and Brenda always got along. He always waited for that knockdown, drag-out teenage girl and their mom fight, and it never happened.
Okay. I mean, thinking back on it, I don't think my mom and I never really fought like that either. We never had that.
Everyone described them more as sisters.
Oh,
It
that's
wasn't
gross.
like they had a best friend relationship, like that really gross, like, be their parent, not their friend.
Yeah.
It was like they had that, but they were also just, like,
They just didn't
like
have
me
the
and
problems
Nicole.
with it.
Like, you know how, like, yes, I'm
Yeah.
her parent, but we can act like sisters all day. So they had a wonderful relationship.
Yeah.
And
Sometimes
it genuinely,
you just have a good relationship with your parents. It doesn't always have to be bad.
no, and
it
it
just it happens. It's awesome.
it's just very rare for teenage daughters and mom, and I just really want to, like, there was no
They
fighting
didn't have
between
that.
them.
Yeah. There was no tumultuous.
And this wasn't a family that
relationship
had
there.
secrets. They shared everything with each other. They were very, like, close.
Yeah.
And it isn't like this is an image we're portraying and it's all going to get shattered later.
Yeah.
This is them. This is the Powells.
I love it.
Sydney also loved playing sports. She tried a bunch before landing on soccer, and she ended up being insanely good at it. She had 2 pretty bad concussions in high school while playing. Both sent her to the hospital, but nothing major. Just some really good ones.
A concussion in soccer is minimal.
Yeah. But that didn't stop her from excelling at school like her mom. Sydney loved school, and her hard work paid off, earning her a presidential scholarship to the University of Mount Union, which was about an hour from where they lived in Ohio.
Okay. That's not bad.
So it was perfect. It wasn't a full ride scholarship by any means, but it meant Steve and Brenda wouldn't be paying full price tuition.
Scholarship is a scholarship.
You're right? Money off is money off.
Absolutely.
So in the fall of 2018, Steve and Brenda drove Sydney and all of her stuff to Mount Union University to move into her dorms. Sydney was super excited to focus on sports medicine, which eventually turned into psychology, and a few other majors in between. Like it does.
Okay, yeah.
She joined a sorority, she made friends. Her roommate Lauren was a friend from high school. She was thriving in college. She didn't end up coming home as often as she thought she would need to. She came home mostly on breaks. And she just was really loving college life.
I feel like, especially if you join a sorority, like your first year in, you're generally pretty much thriving. Very outwards of you.
Yes. The summer between freshman and sophomore year, Sydney lived at home doing normal college kid things. She worked, hung out, she, worked with the local basketball, like the local sports center.
Probably like a YMCA
Yeah,
or something
type
along
thing
those
for like
lines.
their
Okay.
community.
Yeah.
And of course she spent a lot of time with her family. She'd just been away from at college.
Yeah.
Hang out with your little brother. And Sydney went back to school for her sophomore year. She was roommates with Lauren again, and this time they were in a suite. So they had 2 suite mates. And so there's like a main living area with rooms off of it and the bathroom off of it, so you don't have to like go down to like the normal public dorm bathrooms. And so you have your own area. So it's a little nicer, but we're still in a dorm. Yeah, a little fancy.
Fancy getting a suite your sophomore year. My goodness.
Right. But something changed when Sydney went back to school this time, though. For the first time in her life, her grades slipped. She goes from a 3.8 to a 2.2, causing her to go on academic probation.
Oh.
This was devastating to Sydney. Her lowest grade ever was a B. So this wasn't like her. By Christmas break, she failed.
Well, I'm sorry. Also, if you slip grade-wise, you can get kicked out of your sorority.
Yep, so we're on academic probation.
Yeah.
So that, like, we're starting to go there,
I
yeah.
know people hate on sororities, but they actually do so much good.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Like, they make you have your grades up. They make you be part of philanthropies.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the whole thing.
Yes. By Christmas break, she failed 3 out of 4 classes.
Oh, no.
Dean Fraser met with Sydney and told her that because of her academic standing, she was unenrolled from the college. Basically, she was suspended. They suggested Sydney needed a break. It didn't mean she couldn't come back, just not this semester. They felt that she just needed to focus a little bit more and a break would help her.
Okay.
And, this is actually a very common thing. Colleges do look for this when you have a large slip in grades quickly. Things start to go down. They, she wasn't expelled. She wasn't kicked out. They just decided we needed a break. It might be too much. From the dean's standpoint, Sydney took this shockingly well. Possibly too well. Sydney went home for Christmas break, but she didn't tell her parents she had been unenrolled because of her grades. After Christmas break, so now it's January of 2020, Sydney went back to Mount Union. She continued to live in her dorm, go to sorority events, and attend her classes. Even though she was disenrolled from the university, it appeared like she went on as if nothing happened. Eventually, word got back to the Associate Dean Gafferty that Sydney was still attending sorority events, so when she approached Sydney to ask her what she was doing, telling her she was unenrolled and couldn't be attending these events, Sydney responded with, "I'm still a student here." The dean said, "No, you signed a suspension letter," and Sydney said, "Yes, I did, but I'm working it out with administration." The dean then told her that she needed to move out of the dorms and asked if she needed help telling her parents, which is something that the dean has done plenty of times. The first few years of college can be a hard adjustment, and most of these kids have never lived away from family or on their own. Suddenly, they're under a whole new type of pressure. On top of the pressure, they already have to do well in college. It's also a stressful time for some. Sydney told the dean she didn't need any help talking to her parents, but asked for a few days to get her stuff out. Sydney didn't leave, though. She stayed living in the dorms.
Uh-huh.
Do you want me to keep going?
Yeah, can you remind me really quick, when was this?
This is January of 2020.
Got it. Go on.
Not long after this, Sydney's keycard was deactivated. She could no longer access her dorm. So this is we're between January and February, like mid to end February is everything we're going through right now.
I'm surprised it took that long.
So not long after this, Sydney's keycard was deactivated. She could no longer access her dorm or her classes. Her name was taken off her suite, as well as her name was removed from sorority dues. When Lauren and a few other friends asked her about these things, she said it was a mistake, and she was figuring it out with administration. Sydney was starting to spend more time sleeping and being in her room, or hiding in a study room somewhere. She was still a form of her bubbly self at sorority events, but friends were starting to notice she seemed sad and stressed. Lauren knew that Sydney did not handle stress well in high school. Sydney would have panic attacks so bad at school that she couldn't see. Like, her vision would go blurry. These would be brought on by the stress of tests or other large high-stake projects. She also figured that's why Sydney was going home on the weekends more and was, not doing all the normal college things.
With the panic attacks and everything like that, they probably triggered ocular migraines or possibly even some type of seizure.
I like this. Keep this. Just
holding.
And put her concussions.
Yep.
Hold. Yep, just hold it.
As a prior soccer player who has suffered concussions and someone who suffers from horrid migraines, go hand in hand. Moving on.
By the end of February, Dean Gafferty figured out that Sydney was still staying in the dorms.
Were people just letting her in? Or was she
Yes.
sneaking in?
She was her friend. She oh, my key, or I left my key card, or oh, I don't have it.
Oh, they're still trying to figure out what's going on.
Yes, but her friends were starting to notice that a little bit more and more.
Okay.
By the end of February, Dean Gafferty figured out that Sydney was still staying in the dorms. So they had another meeting and removed her from the dorms. But Sydney didn't go home. Instead, she bounced from hotel to hotel, still going to classes and things. She was convinced she was going to fix this. She just had to figure it out. At the beginning of March, Sydney's dad, Steve, went to pay next semester's tuition. But when he went to log into the online portal, he couldn't log in to make the payment like he usually did. Steve called Sydney to ask why he couldn't log into the online portal to pay her tuition for the next semester. She said it was an issue on the university's end, and she would talk to them. Sydney then headed over to the university to meet up with her sorority sisters to watch The Bachelor. It was a weekly tradition. They always got together and watched The Bachelor. It was a sorority thing, the whole sorority.
Yeah.
I used to get together with my friend who went to DU, and we would watch Gossip Girl every week.
That's fair.
So, I understand that. It's totally a thing. We would all get together in, the little tiny, common area of that dorm floor and watch it on a tiny TV.
I understand.
So, that part, I was like, I get that.
You don't have to explain this to me. I understand. I was there. I was part of it. Not yours, but...
On March 3rd, 2020, it started off as a normal day for Steve and Brenda.
March 3rd.
March 3rd, 2020.
Okay.
They went about their daily morning routine as usual. On the way to work, Brenda called her mom, Elizabeth, to discuss the plans for when Sydney came home for spring break in about a week or so.
Okay.
Brenda invited her mom to join them for some shopping. They planned to meet halfway at some shops, and Brenda had to end the conversation because she arrived at work. Later that morning, Steve talks with the university about his portal login and trying to pay tuition for next semester. That's when Mount Union informed him that Sydney had been unenrolled from the university, and that's why his portal login isn't working. When Steve asked what's going on, they told him he had to talk to Sydney about it because Sydney's an adult in college, and even though her parents are paying tuition and have access to a portal, that does not mean the college can give them information about anything.
Mm-hmm.
So Steve tried to call Sydney, and she didn't answer. He then texted her saying he needed to talk to her, and he had a few questions for her. A little while after this, Steve gets a Life 360 notification on his phone. Sydney's at home. And he thought that's odd, because she's not supposed to be home until this weekend. And pair that with what he just found out from the university.
Uh-huh.
Steve decided to leave his phone at work so Sydney wouldn't see him coming home via the Life 360 app.
Oh my goodness.
Right? I love Steve. Way to, know your kid.
So sneaky.
Way to know your kid so well to be like, Something's weird. Let me not panic them.
Yeah. But also, you know what? Everything is literally clicking. It's all clicking.
I'll keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
Steve's work was about 15 minutes from the house.
Mm-hmm.
So he got to the house between 11 and 11:30 and started talking to Sydney about what the college had told him. She said that she was really struggling and overwhelmed. She felt like she was wasting their money and her time, and she didn't know how to do any of this. Steve reassured Sydney that they could figure this out and it was going to be okay. Sydney replied with, "My friends have all their shit together, and I don't." So he suggested they call Brenda and fill her in on what was going on. Brenda was great at dealing with a teen crisis and all things Sydney. Brenda, of course, said that she would head to the house. Steve then left and went back to work knowing Brenda was on her way home. At 11:49 a.m., Steve called Brenda, and she told him, "Hey, I'm pulling into the driveway. I'll call you after I'm done talking to Sydney." When Brenda went inside, she wasn't angry with Sydney. She comforted Sydney and asked her what was going on. Sydney confessed to her mom, like she did to her dad, that she was struggling and overwhelmed and she didn't know what to do. Brenda reassured Sydney everything was going to be okay and then called the university to see what was going on and what needed to be done to help Sydney. Mm-hmm. At 12:36, Brenda texted Steve saying she was waiting on a call back from the university and asked him how much was the check that the university was supposed to be returning. So somewhere in here, I believe that Steve thought he was overpaying with her being kicked out since Christmas, since he was trying to pay for the next semester, not the semester they just had. Yep. So there's a whole thing there. Okay. A few minutes later, Steve replied asking Brenda to check on the scholarship, hoping Sydney hadn't lost it, and also asking what she had discussed with Sydney. Dean Fraser and the assistant dean, Michelle Gaffney, together called Brenda back to discuss Sydney. Right after confirming they were talking to Brenda Powell, they heard a scream, followed by a loud thud, followed by a scream and more thuds. Then they heard silence, an expulsion of air, and then more thuds. Both deans were asking, "What's going on? Are you okay? What's happening? Brenda, Brenda." But there was no response at all from anyone. So they said, "If you don't respond, we're going to call the police." Dean Fraser kept talking and trying to get a response. "Brenda, what's going on? Are you okay?" While Dean Gaffney went to the secretary outside the door to get Sydney's address and to call 911. Mm-hmm. Eventually, the phone hangs up. So they called Brenda back. No answer. Finally, by the third try, someone answered. Dean Fraser said, "Brenda, is that you?" And a voice on the other end said, "Yes, this is Brenda." Both deans looked at each other, shook their heads no. They both knew it was Sydney and not Brenda. So they said, "Sydney, we know that's you." Sydney hung up the phone. At 12:51, just 15 minutes after Brenda had last texted Steve, his phone rang. But it wasn't Brenda, and it wasn't the university. It was Steve's friend Ken. He was a local police detective. He was calling to ask if everything was okay because there was a call out to Steve's address for a welfare check on a woman in distress. Steve immediately replied, "Brenda's at home." So Steve calls Brenda, and she doesn't answer. So he calls Sydney. Sydney answers. "Mom's on the phone with the university." Steve responds, "Well, the cops are on the way to the house." That's when Sydney became hysterical and told her dad someone had tried to break in. Steve calls Ken back and says that the call is legit. He told him what Sydney said and that he is now on the way to the house. When police arrive at the house, they can hear screaming coming from inside the house. They see a window broken in the back of the house. Once police are in the house, Sydney won't let them down a hallway because she says there's so much blood, and she is just hysterical. They have to physically help her out of the house. And there's body cam footage of all of this. And we are going to play it for you. But I'm going to break it down into pieces.
Take her outside.
Come on. Come on.
Is she gonna be okay?
Come on.
I
Come on. You just need to cooperate with me, all right?
want my dad.
Huh?
I want my dad.
What happened? What's going on? What's going on?
We We heard a bang, and she told me to get out, and then I heard screaming, so I came back, and she was on the ground.
Okay, you heard a
I ran
bang.
out back. There was a bang, someone broken.
Okay.
You can make out a lot of what Sydney's saying. She's incoherent for a few things. She's going on about a bang and asking for her dad. And you can see the officers are physically having to support her and get her out of this house.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot of context for things right now.
Yeah.
But this is where we're starting. This
Yeah.
next part we're going to play. They get Sydney down to the bottom of the driveway, and they realize that she's bleeding from her hand. And they start asking her some questions.
What is your name?
Sydney?
Are you cut?
I don't think so.
Yeah, you're cut somewhere.
I don't think so.
Yeah, your hand.
No, I was helping her. I grabbed her.
All right, stop. I'll tell you what. Can you sit on the ground here real quick?
I don't.
Come on. Come
You
on.
said the ground.
Yeah, you're fine right there.
No.
You're fine right there.
I grabbed the knife.
Before the Britain Street exit ramp. A truck lost some concrete.
This is minor. They might have a more. I don't know. Check that victim in there. She's got cuts on her hands. I don't know what they have in there, but there's a female down in there. Yeah.
What's going on?
I don't know.
So, we see them discover her hands bleeding. They put her down on the ground. They kind of start asking her what her name is. She offered up something about grabbing a knife with the cut. At the end of
She
that,
starts getting hysterical.
yes,
Even more so?
Yeah, more so. Her hysteric level just keeps rising.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yep.
And at the very end of that clip, you saw somebody approach. That is Steve.
Dad?
Dad is now here.
I'm the dad.
Okay,
Sydney.
what's-
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Daddy!
What? What the hell? Where's my wife?
The window's broken, Dad!
Where?
The back window's broken in!
So you're gonna have to. There's
Daddy!
officers inside there. So
I don't know! There
go
was
check
so
the
much
lady in the
blood!
house. Okay. She's got minor cuts.
I feel so bad for Steve. He doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know where to go. He doesn't know what's going on. He's never seen Sydney like this.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, I mean, I don't personally know if this is what I would do or if what happened, but like, I see my daughter, she's alive, she's hysterical, but she's with police. Where the fuck is my wife?
And that's what he yells. He goes, "Where's Brenda? Where's my wife?"
Yeah.
And that's when he leaves her. We're gonna watch this clip
With
again.
the popo.
And because he goes away, he goes to find Brenda. Police don't let Steve pass the front door. So Steve comes back out to Sydney in the driveway, and now he's trying to figure out what's going on.
I mean, I understand.
And the police are now going to try to get Sydney to talk more.
You said your name's Sydney? Ma'am, is your name Sydney? What's your last name?
Yeah, he's in Talmadge. Yes, I talked to him.
What is it? Powell. What's your date of birth? Huh?
Yeah.
What's your date of birth?
Yeah.
I have another one
no.
coming.
No, but somebody's got to take.
I have another med unit coming. All right, you got some gloves.
So, as we saw, Sydney is sitting on the ground. She has her arms wrapped around her knees, kind of like cradling herself like
Yeah.
that. And you
Fetal
can tell,
position.
Yeah, but like sitting upright.
Yeah.
Fetal position. And her socks are bloody, and there's blood dripping everywhere from the cut on her hand. We'll get into that in a minute. And then she just tips over.
I literally asked him, like, did he push her? And she's just like, no. And I'm like,
yeah, I thought
okay.
he did too at first, but then like, yeah. And I feel so bad for Steve. He's
has
confused because
no
there's a stretcher that's coming in. Police aren't giving him, honestly, police don't even know either. And
yeah.
Sydney, no one will let him near his wife. He's never seen his daughter in a state like this. She's not making sense. She's hysterics. Like,
I mean, he doesn't even know if his wife is dead. He literally knows nothing.
Nothing right now.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you the very final clip of this body cam footage. The police start talking to Steve about Sydney.
What'd you say?
Oh, we don't, sir, we don't. Does she have any mental
No,
issues?
no.
No?
No, she was having a little trouble at school at Mount Union, and she came back home to try and work things out. Just today is when I found it. She's been, I think she has been going to class for the last couple of weeks.
So she just came home today?
Yeah, today. It's like 11 o'clock.
Sydney. Sydney. Sydney.
Oh, fuck. What is going on with
Sydney. What's going on? Huh?
I need to know what's going on.
We don't know yet.
At the beginning of that clip, police asked Steve, does she have any mental health issues? And he goes, no. She just came home from school. We're having a little bit of trouble at college.
Yeah.
That poor man. And I'm going to say that so many times in this episode. And Sydney is just non-responsive. Lightly
Clearly.
tapping her head on the ground, scratching the asphalt. And something that is kind of hard to notice unless you're like really looking in that footage is her eyes are starting to shake back and forth like this. I had to watch it quite a few times and closely.
Oh my.
And you can obviously hear how scared Steve is
Yeah.
for this whole situation. Meanwhile,
Especially because he literally still has no idea what's going on.
no idea. And he was
Meanwhile.
just at his house a few hours earlier.
Yeah.
And this was not the state of it. Meanwhile, police found 50-year-old Brenda in her bedroom on the floor in a pool of blood. She was alive but bleeding out quickly. She had multiple injuries to her neck and head. Police were shocked when they found Brenda had a pulse. They couldn't believe she was still alive after such a brutal attack. Barely alive, but she was alive. So they started life-saving measures while waiting on EMS to arrive, which is odd because, like, we see that ambulance there the whole freaking time almost for the body cam footage of them taking her out, so I don't know. Brenda was then rushed to the hospital, and Sydney was also taken to the hospital via ambulance. An officer rode with her and continued to try to talk to her about what happened. It was decided to take Sydney to the psychiatric wing of the hospital. She was not responsive to anyone when she arrived. She wasn't talking. She wasn't talking in the ambulance either. The only time she said something was as they were taking her into the hospital. She began saying over and over, "Get out of my house, get out of my house, get out of my house." Detectives continued to try and speak with her, and it became very clear to them that she is in some sort of psychotic episode and isn't even acknowledging or aware of the detectives or even aware of what is going on. Ultimately, they decide it's time to leave because Sydney can't tell them anything. Instead of being taken to the hospital where Brenda and Sydney were, Steve was taken to the police station to be interviewed. Since there was no one else to talk to, police needed to figure out what was going on. I really feel like we could have waited a little bit, but you know.
Yeah. Like, okay.
I understand, but
I get it. But also, like, something very traumatic is currently happening with the woman in his family, like, immediate family. And I think perhaps it would be prudent, especially if he arrived afterwards and he clearly is not a suspect. Like, it would be prudent if you would let him go be with his wife, or at least near his wife, because there's, like, okay, there's proven as facts that being with, like, being near someone you love during times like that can actually increase, like, blood circulation and things like that, and that it could, as cliche as this fucking sounds, it could be life-saving to have your loved one with you.
It can be sometimes.
Yeah.
They began questioning Steve about the events of the day and what was going on with Sydney at Mount Union. And unfortunately, while being interviewed by police, Steve found out that Brenda died at the hospital. And we will come back to Steve's interview and how these police officers patted him on the shoulder, sat down next to him, and continued to ask him questions. He did have his friend in there. I will say they weren't interrogating him and going hard, but I feel like we could have stopped. I feel like we could have been done at that point for right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're going to come back to that, but I have to tell you about the investigation that was going on at the house first before we
Please.
can get into more Steve's interview.
Please.
Police instantly went to work searching the house, investigating what happened. They started with the broken window in the back of the house. The window was broken from the outside, but there was also blood on the inside of the window, where there shouldn't have been. As if somebody already had blood on them when they broke it. They also noticed the sliding glass door right next to the window was unlocked. In the bedroom, they found so much blood splattered on the walls and the floor. It was absolutely everywhere. They also found a frying pan, as in a cast iron skillet, and a kitchen knife, along with Brenda's phone covered in blood. There was also a set of bloody footprints, but not bare footprints. Sock prints, if you will. Only one set of footprints were found, and they appeared to be Sydney's. Since she was wearing bloody socks when they arrived at the house, all of this paired with no 911 call from the house. The police came to the conclusion that there was no break-in, but a high possibility that Sydney had killed her mother. Police were still talking to Steve as they discovered all of this. And even after they told him Brenda had died, they asked him if Brenda and Sydney had ever fought. He said no, never. He told them Sydney was never mad at her mom. He told them about the Mount Union drama that was unfolding, but that Brenda and him were handling it. No one was mad at anybody. There wasn't any arguments, and there wasn't any fights over it.
Yeah.
Just 5 hours after Dean Fraser and Dean Gafferty called 911 to check on Brenda, Sydney was being served an arrest warrant for the murder of her mother, Brenda Powell. This shocked absolutely everyone that knew Brenda and Sydney. No one could believe it. Steve and Elizabeth were in shock and were scrambling to figure out what happened and how to help Sydney. Notice how I said they served Sydney with an arrest warrant, but she wasn't actually arrested? That's because she remained in the hospital while Steve paid her bond, and then she went on an involuntary 72-hour hold at the hospital. When Sydney arrived at the hospital, it was determined that she was in a catatonic state and was having a psychotic break, which explains all of her actions in the body cam footage, the scratching the ground, the completely blank stare, the not responding, and her eyes shaking back and forth.
Yep.
Steve had never seen Sydney the way we saw her at the end of the driveway before she was taken to the hospital. After Sydney's 72-hour hold, she went to Akron General Medical Center from March 7th to March 16th. This was involuntary and ordered by her doctors.
Oh, good.
It was here that Sydney was diagnosed with schizophrenia. This absolutely shocked Steve. Sydney had never been to a therapist and had never shown any signs of mental health problems that he knew of. But she is at the age that schizophrenia can emerge in females. Once Sydney began taking medicine to treat her schizophrenia diagnosis, she was able to become well enough to be released from the hospital and await trial at home. Steve's number one goal was to make sure she was taken care of. Sydney was released from the hospital on March 16th, 2020, to Brenda's mom, Elizabeth. I want to also note, we are not shut down yet. We're
about
not,
like a week.
We're a week away. We're starting to have little murmurs of COVID. Murmurs.
I got back from a cruise like March 7th, and my boss made me stay home for 2 weeks just in case.
Yeah.
And then like not even 2 days before I was supposed to go back to work, lockdown.
This is also unfolding as this is happening.
Yep.
Okay. Steve's number one goal was to make sure Sydney was taken care of. Sydney was released from the hospital on March 16th to Brenda's mom, Elizabeth. The family felt it was the best place for her because Elizabeth and Bob were retired and they lived on 100 acres. In a little 100-year-old home, Sydney would be secluded and with someone who would be able to be with her all the time to make sure she was taking her medicines and would have a routine that would be beneficial to Sydney. Which I kind of thought was really wild that we just like released her that quickly at
Yes,
home at
I
trial, no matter what the diagnosis, no matter what we're
I
doing.
agree.
I thought that was wild, but then we have to pair it with COVID.
Yeah.
And not that we were in full shutdown mode, hospitals and courts had to know this was coming. So
Yeah.
I want to say that played into this a little bit. And also the location that we could put her in while she is waiting at home waiting trial.
Can you remind me how old she was at this time?
19.
Okay. I'm going to go keep my thoughts to myself for now.
Because you know I have explanations.
Yep.
So since we just did all that COVID talking, the whole world shut down right after she got to her grandma's. And she would stay on the farm with her grandparents until trial begins in 2023.
I feel like COVID was a fever dream.
Yes. I'm really starting to feel that way now.
I know, right?
In the summer of 2020, Sydney went to University Hospital for a second opinion about something that was
Hold
found.
on.
What?
Her trial wasn't set until 2023?
We'll get there. Her trial doesn't start till 2023. That's not when it was set for. But I'm about to get into that. It's literally like a paragraph down.
My bad. Go on.
You're good. In the summer of 2020, Sydney went to the University Hospital for a second opinion about something that was found on her head MRI. She was placed on the epilepsy unit floor for 6 days. It was determined that Sydney did not have any signs of epilepsy. This left schizophrenia as the only option. She began seeing multiple therapists and was also diagnosed with PTSD and major depression, which we see a lot in people who are accused of murdery things.
This isn't
It's like
up, though.
No, her PTSD and her, like, that was just, like, added on.
PTSD and depression can come from
The
the
murder.
yes.
Yes, which is why, like, that was diagnosed after.
That's
not.
I mean, all of it was diagnosed
Well, the
after.
so I need to preface this before we go into this further. The schizophrenia diagnosis did not come out of an expert or somebody that she was taken to for this. It came out of the 72-hour hold doctors who had no idea of any of that. Like, they have her medical history, they have all of her records, they have the event that took place, but this diagnosis came out of multiple doctors in different places who were not speaking with each other and getting there.
I mean, okay. You know how I feel about all of these
I know.
schizophrenia diagnoses, and
Remember what I said to you before we did this.
Yes.
Okay. You always have to remember. I'll talk about that in a minute.
We'll get here. We'll get back
Okay.
to
We'll get there. We'll get there. I knew I wrote this a certain way because I knew where we were going.
Yes. Okay.
Sydney was then put on a regimen of medicines, and over the next few months, Sydney began to show positive progress with the meds. This was a med regimen to treat schizophrenia. Elizabeth said it took a while for her to stop looking so glazed over and to adjust to the new meds, but pretty soon she started to see Sydney's smile and glow come back. It took months and months. But eventually, Sydney's body was adjusting to the meds, and they were working.
And she was actually taking the meds.
Yes.
Okay.
Grandma, that's why she's with Grandma.
Yep.
Grandma has a routine for her. She's making sure she is on her meds
Great
and on
news.
everything with the doctors. She's at evaluations. I mean,
Okay.
she is with Grandma because they want to help her.
Good.
Yeah. Sydney did have a moment where she began to feel symptoms of, and I will get into this later because I know we haven't touched on this yet, but I will touch on it in trial, where she began hearing noises, hearing her voices. Sydney instantly spoke up to her therapist and her grandma when it started happening instantly, and this allowed them to quickly adjust her meds, and slowly her symptoms calmed back down, and Sydney was coming back again. February 2022 is when trial is supposed to start. Defense was trying to get Sydney declared unfit to stand trial, and Sydney had entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. Steve, Sydney's brother Andrew, her grandma, and the whole family just wanted Sydney better, and they just wanted to help her. The family was pushing for the not guilty by reason of insanity so that Sydney could continue to get the help she needs. They didn't want her to go to jail. But they also didn't want her to just get off easy either. They all knew this wasn't Sydney. That wasn't Sydney that day, and it's still not Sydney. We're getting her back, but this isn't the Sydney they've always known.
Yeah.
And jail was not going to help her. Steve even spoke at Sydney's pretrial hearing. He begged prosecutors not to proceed with murder charges against his daughter for killing his wife, Brenda, during what the family believes was an episode of psychosis. He said, "I don't know why we're doing this. This isn't what anyone here wants. I don't know how she can handle it. I don't know how I can handle it. I'm just trying to keep my family together the best way I still can."
Yeah.
They did not want a trial. They did not want a trial. The whole family, they fought to not go through this. The state, on the other hand, wanted a whole ass trial.
So they refused to probably do a plea deal.
I have seen multiple accounts of the state prosecutor being just determined and hell-bent to get a guilty verdict on this. That he was just determined no matter what. He wanted that guilty verdict. He knew he could get it, and he was trying this case because he wanted to do it.
Okay.
And while I get, there's a reason the state is allowed to charge and go over people's heads and do things like this. I get it. I understand. And, domestic violence cases, other things, intimidation, I understand. But when an entire ass family is fighting you so hard and begging you to not put them through this, when it all happened within the realm of their family, I feel like we should listen a little bit. Who's this benefiting? The prosecutor's guilt record, his guilty verdict numbers? Who's benefiting in this? No one.
Yeah. Because even if she takes a plea deal, he would ultimately still be winning a case.
Yes.
Okay.
They had tunnel vision. He was only focusing on the fact that she tried to cover it up. And I totally get that. But I just, they're not even saying we want her to get off. We want a punishment. We just don't want jail.
Yeah.
She needs something, just not this. So the prosecution then gets a doctor to evaluate Sydney. And this doctor declares Sydney fit to stand trial. And that the catatonic state of Sydney after the murder was because of her coming to the realization that she had just killed her mother. She also diagnosed her with PTSD from the murder. Which I figured, because, that generally comes afterwards, whether you meant to do it or not.
Usually.
Meanwhile, Sydney continued her new medicine regimen, along with learning coping techniques for high-stress situations, like her upcoming trial, which was really good, because the trial does begin in September of 2023. It was heavily televised, and everyone was watching, which I hadn't mentioned yet, because this case became national attention quickly. With
especially right before COVID.
A beloved mother in the community and
TikTok
nurse
growing as fast as it did during COVID. Yeah.
So the prosecution focused on how Sydney lied to her father and the police about a break-in to cover up what she did to her mother. They went on about how natural lying had become to Sydney at that point, because she had been lying to everyone in her life for months about attending college when she had been kicked out. Sydney continued to lie to everyone right up until the end. She was so caught up in the lies that she couldn't get out of them unless she killed Brenda before she could find out. Combine that with realizing what she had just done to her mother, she finally shut down in shock, and that's what happened outside the house. The defense, on the other hand, says, yeah, Sydney killed her mom. She did it. We're not arguing that today. But she was in a psychotic break when it happened, and she could not appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions. They went on about how since the attack, Sydney has received treatment for schizophrenia and is receiving this treatment with very good results. Steve and Elizabeth both testified about how this was completely unlike Sydney and how close Brenda and Sydney were. Catherine Milligan, a teacher from Sydney's high school, also testified about a time during Sydney's junior year when Sydney and a friend came to her room, Lauren, and Sydney was crying and distraught, and she was saying she can't see the numbers. She was getting ready to take a test. She was so distraught that Catherine actually had to go talk to that teacher about her taking the test the other day. Remember how we were talking about her panic attacks and her vision and her concussions? See, we're gathering all this for the defense here.
Also, something you said earlier is kind of sticking out to me a little bit now, too. That, like, even when she was younger, she worried a lot.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that was really weird when I was first reading that until I got to, like, more of this stuff, and I'm all, ew, now I understand.
Yeah.
Sydney was being treated by 3 doctors, and they all agreed on Sydney's diagnosis. The main testimony from Sydney's doctors came from Dr. James Reardon. He testified that Sydney doesn't remember the attack. She remembers flashes of things from that day. She remembers her mom sitting on the couch with her and comforting her, telling her, "It's okay. We're going to work this out." But in her head, she was hearing things like, "You're worthless. It's not going to work. They hate you. Kill yourself." The next thing she remembers is walking up and down the basement stairs, just up and down them, just wanting to get out. I need to get out of here. Her next memory is waking up at the hospital. He also testified that Sydney didn't go from being normal to a psychotic break within a matter of moments. Sydney had began severely deteriorating into a psychotic break after Christmas break. But she was already breaking down before then. This was shown by her grades starting to slip when she returned to Mount Union in the fall. Sydney was having long periods of lucid thoughts with periods of psychotic breaks, and unfortunately, her first violent psychotic break was when she murdered Brenda. In other words, Sydney began living in a false reality after she was put on academic probation. Sydney wanted so badly to be like her mother and to make her proud and to succeed at college. Sydney never struggled academically before. She didn't know what to do. She acted like everything was perfectly fine. Which is why, to Dean Fraser, it seemed like Sydney took the news of getting kicked out of school really well. It's because to Sydney, it wasn't happening. To her, she was doing great at school. And that's all the dean pulled her in there to tell her. So when Sydney returned from Christmas break, in her mind, she was still a student and everything was normal. Then the meetings with Dean Gafferty started the questions from the sorority and her friends about her name being missing and her key card not working. And each time this happened, her mental state deteriorated more and more, trying to keep her reality in place. She wasn't lying to hide what was happening or to deceive people. Sydney truly thought this was her reality. And honestly, I want to know if you thought of the same thing that I thought of whenever I looked at that. The best way I can figure out how to describe this is one, it just reminds me of Mona from Pretty Little Liars. Operating, you remember how they described her in a state of hyper being?
Yeah.
Operating on such a high level. Now, Sydney's doing the same thing, just in a way less TV way of this.
Yeah.
Simplify it. This was her reality. In her perfect reality world, she was enrolled at college. She was going to class. Because she did go up to class right till the very end. Mm-hmm. She was still telling everyone she lived there. She told the dean, "No, I'm still a student here. I'm fixing it right now." Mm-hmm. The body cam footage was a big help in diagnosing Sydney, showing Sydney going into the catatonic state, and her actions before as well as after were very helpful in determining whether or not Sydney was malingering, which is a big old fancy word for faking it. It was determined by the doctors at the hospital when she first arrived, the doctors in her 72-hour hold, her doctors in her longer hold afterwards, and by all of her therapists, or by the main therapist in here, that Sydney was not malingering or feigning any of her symptoms.
Okay.
The defense didn't like that at all. At all. But I've also... Here's my other part on this. I have never seen a case with schizophrenia in it where every single doctor is on the same page and agreeing with her diagnosis. And they are not being paid as a witness and expert in court to do it. Like, it is... Like, legit, those doctors at the hospital to immediately go catatonic, you're in a psychotic break, let's go here, instead of being like, are you faking this? Like, what do you know? Because they know what she came in on. Mm-hmm. It's just very interesting. I've never seen so many doctors so on the same page without being paid for it.
Yeah. I have a lot of thoughts about all of this, if you can't tell.
I can tell, and I'm waiting for them. I am excited. Okay. Dr. Reardon also testified that Sydney started having audio hallucinations. I'm not going to look at her for this because she's not, I don't like her for this part here because I don't like this part either.
I'll look at the camera.
Starting at 11 years old. And that while schizophrenia doesn't give someone a pass on a crime like this, it does explain that Sydney couldn't appreciate the wrongfulness of her actions at the time of the crime. So,
Hold the fuck up. Hold the fuck up. You just said to me that this doctor said she was having hallucinations
audio.
at the age of 11.
So, this is where...
No. It's a yes or no question.
All right, Penguin. All right, Penguin. So, yes, this is what he just said. Let me expand on it. Because I was like, is this audio hallucinations or is this coming into puberty? Because her audio hallucinations are more... They're all about her and, like, a self-hating and, like, kill yourself. You're not good enough. You're worthless. You don't need to be here.
So it's the negative side of being a people pleaser.
So that part of the pre and all of that, I don't really know. Because she doesn't really have any mental, like... She doesn't ever really see therapists. We don't have that part. We don't, like... Other than her being a worrier, so, like, combine that with her worrier and that, like, this is the one part of his testimony that I'm like, you're losing me a little bit.
Okay.
But her audio hallucinations are, and I mean, there's so many different sides to this and everything.
Yeah.
But that one is an interesting part that I have to put in here because it wouldn't be telling all the sides without that. But I kind of looked at that and I'm all, okay.
Because, I mean, okay, ultimately, what is being said to me is that all teenage girls between the ages of 11, let's go 14, because that's generally when puberty hits.
That's what I thought too.
You're telling me that my conscience,
Dory?
yeah,
Marlin, it's Marlin.
thank you, is telling me, hey, you look fat in them jeans, bitch, is actually me having hallucinations? Is that?
According to this doctor, kind of. It's just all the examples
Weird.
that he used, I feel like as a male, didn't have these thoughts, but as a female, I'm all, so, like, normal 11-year-old thoughts? I don't know. So,
I mean, and of course it's different because we were in high school at a very different time than this girl was.
yes.
So bullying was different for us.
But also, like, having self-loathing thoughts in your head. So, you know,
I
there's
feel like
people
that's
who, like, have a internal monologue and people who don't have an internal monologue.
Which is terrifying to me.
Okay, we all just learned about this a few years ago.
I know,
anyway,
it's terrifying.
So she could have honestly just have an internal monologue that's very self-loathing.
Maybe.
And this is what her internal for her younger one was. I don't know what we have for being older. But as you could kind of hear in the house, it was kind of similar. I'm
just saying, if you don't loathe yourself just a little bit in your teenage years, what are you doing right?
Can we have that level of... Yeah, like, what are you doing? Like, help. Can you...
How does it feel?
Can you teach a class? Yeah. So, I'm going to cover one more thing with the defense before we hop in the prosecution.
Okay.
So, the defense heavily focused on the mental health side with a lot of expert witness testimony about Sydney's mental state and the fact that there was no motive for Sydney to kill Brenda. Sydney had already come clean to both of her parents about what was going on. There was no secret that the university was revealing on that phone call. Brenda was trying to help Sydney with the situation. Neither Steve nor Brenda were mad at Sydney. Killing Brenda would not solve anything for Sydney.
Yeah.
So the only conclusion can be that Sydney was in a psychotic break. There is no other reason. Which I gotta agree with the defense. There's no motive for Sydney to have done that. Like, literally everything, and that was the thing that I didn't know in the episode that I watched. I didn't know they knew everything already.
The defense or the parents?
The parents.
Yeah.
In the podcast episode I watched, they were like, Brenda was finding out for that. I didn't know that they already knew. And that changed a lot for me. Because suddenly this wasn't her trying to stop her mom from finding out.
Yeah.
She already told them about it.
Yeah. I have thoughts about it. I'm just keep going.
Yeah. The prosecution, on the other hand, focused on the physical evidence, the crime scene at the house, her college records, cell phone records, and her actions before, during, and after the crime. And of course, their mental health expert that disputed all the claims the hospital and the doctors made. They claimed Sydney had every reason to kill Brenda. She had been lying to everyone for months and keeping a pretty big secret. So when it started to all unravel, Sydney became desperate to keep up the lies in secret, so she killed Brenda. They used Brenda's cell phone records to show the entire attack happened in about 4 minutes. Based on the time between the phone calls and the time spent on the phone with Brenda, in about 4 minutes, Sydney managed to strike Brenda numerous times with a frying pan and stab her nearly 30 times in the neck and head. Pictures of Brenda's bedroom where the attack took place were shown to the jury, as well as Sydney's bloody footprints all over the house. They showed the broken window and how there was blood on both sides of the window, along with photos of Sydney's cut finger bleeding. They also brought the frying pan itself into the courtroom. Like, held that bitch up for the jury to see. After the defense rested, the prosecution called a rebuttal expert witness to the stand. Dr. Sylvia Obradovich, a clinical psychologist, interviewed Sydney for 2 hours and diagnosed her with borderline personality traits and unspecified anxiety disorder and concluded that she was malingering.
Did you say the defense or the prosecution?
Prosecution.
Wonderful. Proceed.
Obradovich said she did not use any of the tests administered by the defense experts to rule out malingering. Furthermore, she testified that such tests did not accurately reveal whether someone was insane at the time of the crime, because they were administered years after the homicide. She also disagreed with their diagnosis that Sydney was suffering from a psychotic break due to schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. She said she took a different approach than the others by examining what she knew to be true and comparing it to Sydney's statements and symptoms. It just didn't add up to schizophrenia. She said, noting that Sydney reported that she began experiencing symptoms at the age of 11, which would make her case extremely rare because women's symptoms of schizophrenia usually don't surface until mid to late 20s. When shown the video of Sydney appearing to be catatonic laying on the driveway, she said that Sydney Powell was suffering from shock after the trauma of killing her mother. Catatonia, she said, was not something that one could slip in and out of. Rather, the condition usually lasts 24 hours to several days. She also disputed that Sydney had no motive to kill her mother, stating that Sydney was willing to kill her mother because she would do anything from disappointing her. Anything to keep from disappointing her. The defense questioned her expertise, noting that Obradovich had never before testified as an expert witness on insanity matter in a criminal case. The judge recognized her as an expert witness over their objection, and the judge also denied the defense a rebuttal witness after Obradovich's testimony, stating that the court had heard enough of expert testimony on this matter from the defense.
Okay.
After 2 weeks of trial, the jury was sent to deliberate, which they did for 15 minutes before going home for the weekend.
Oh, God. Okay.
That was just fun to do to you.
You're a bitch.
They then deliberated for another 9 hours before returning their verdict to the judge. So the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. The jury didn't believe she was insane at the time of her crimes, and she knew what she was doing. Ohio has an automatic 15 years to life sentence for murder. So the defense asked for 15 years to life, while the prosecution asked for 18 years to life. That really pissed off the defense. Like, what was the point of the 3 extra years in there?
I don't know.
Like, for funsies?
Just to nail in the fucking coffin?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
On September 28th, 2023, Sydney had her sentencing.
Ms. Powell, is there anything you want to say to me at this time? Okay.
I have advised Ms. Powell that given the nature of her appeal, she should not make a statement today.
And I understand that, but I have to give her the opportunity to do so. All right. Thank you very much. First of all, to the victims, to the family and friends, I am terribly sorry for your loss here. I cannot imagine what you have been through. I have received and read all of the letters that have been sent to me. I have considered the evidence that was brought into evidence at the trial, the statements of counsel, and all of the information that is before me at this time. I do find that counts 2 and 3 merge with count 1 for purposes of sentencing in this matter. Based upon the facts and circumstances of this case and in consideration of the relevant sentencing factors, including seriousness and recidivism, and applying the minimum sanction that the court has determined will protect the public and punish the offender without imposing an unnecessary burden on state and local resources, the court imposes the following sentence. On count 1, ma'am, I sentence you to an indefinite sentence of 15 years to life in the Ohio Department of Corrections. On count 4 of the indictment, I sentence you to 3 years in the Ohio Department of Corrections. Those two sentences to be run concurrent with and not consecutive to each other. Ma'am, understand that you have a right to appeal this decision, and that notice of appeal must be filed within 30 days of the sentencing judgment entry. Your attorney has indicated to me that you are without funds to hire an attorney to represent you for appeal. Is that correct? And you wish for me to appoint counsel to represent you?
Yes.
All right. I will do that. We will try and get that done.
Sydney's family was heartbroken because they knew this wasn't Sydney, and going to jail wasn't going to help her. They knew Brenda wouldn't want this and would want Sydney to have the help that she needed.
And here, it seems to me, and tell me, that what the family was saying to the prosecutors in those letters, in conversations all throughout this process, you're saying was essentially ignored, and the state did what it wanted to do here.
Yeah, Julie, that's absolutely right. And it wasn't only reflected in the letters, but it's been from day one. You know, I've been involved on this case since March 4th, 2020, the day after Brenda was killed, and I've reached out to the prosecutor repeatedly and asked them just to have a meeting with the family and listen to them, listen to the pain that they are experiencing, listen to what they're trying to accomplish with Sydney, listen to what Brenda would want. And those rights were ignored. You know, as you said, we have a constitutional amendment, Marshall's Law, that says the prosecution must consult with the victims and consider their wishes. That doesn't mean they're going to do exactly what they're going to say, but I've never experienced anything like this in 30 years. We had a prosecutor, Mr. Stano, who stood up and said, you know, I'm going to be respectful of you, Mr. Powell. That same prosecutor subpoenaed Stephen Powell, the victim in this case, the surviving spouse, the father of Sydney Powell, subpoenaed him into court and then asked the judge to treat him like a hostile witness. That's not what we do in this system. And I know you know, as a former prosecutor, your job as a prosecutor is not only just to secure a conviction, but to see that justice is done. And that wasn't done in this case. And I understand, you know, he fought hard at trial. But when the last opportunity, really the last opportunity to show some level of deference, some level of understanding, some level of insight into the suffering of the victims at sentencing, and simply follow their wishes or acknowledge their wishes to impose a minimum sentence, he couldn't do that. And this trial, unfortunately, pulled back the curtain that Mr. Stano cares about victims.
So I want to go back to the judge's sentencing video. Did y'all catch the part about appeals and helping appoint her counsel? Well, that's because Sydney's family was already working on an appeal. They said it's what Brenda would have wanted. And, well, they have grounds for one. Remember how the judge did not allow the defense to have a rebuttal witness to the prosecution's rebuttal witness? Because you've already testified enough on this matter. Well, or you've had enough expert testimony on this matter. Well, that may be true. But the subject matter had not been expertly testified on yet in the way that the prosecution was presenting it. So,
Also, I'm pretty sure there's no law with like a limit of how many expert witnesses you can have for any case.
yeah, there's
They're
not.
just being annoying.
So, because the judge told them, no, you've already had enough testimony on this and would not allow them a rebuttal, they got the appeal. December 26, 2024. The judge ruled in favor of Sydney on her appeal and overturned her conviction, and she will be getting a new trial, stating the judge fucked up by not allowing the rebuttal witness. And that is where we currently stand today.
Oh. Okay.
Thoughts?
Where do you want me to start?
Anywhere.
Okay, so You're going to be upset with this. I don't think she has schizophrenia.
Okay.
Personally, like,
Oh, no, I knew exactly where you were going to sit on this when I wrote this episode.
Yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I knew.
Here we are. Why did you know?
Because I know your thoughts on this.
True. Absolutely. I don't know, just based off of what I've been told and the evidence itself, I don't think it's a psychotic break. Like, and for the sheer fact that you showed me the cam footage and I literally looked and said, she's in shock. That didn't look like a break. The fact that she was trying to cover it up, trying to come up with a story, put evidence in her home after she just brutally attacked her mother to make it seem like someone else did this. Someone who is having a psychotic break cannot piece together, oh, I need to make it seem like someone else did this.
Oh, I agree.
I'm
not disagreeing on that.
Thank you.
It's very interesting. There's a lot to this.
Yeah.
I don't think I agree with schizophrenia as the generalized diagnosis.
Yes.
I believe that if we were to go back into, let's go back to Peyton Leitner's episode with Morgan and Anissa. And we went through all the different categories of schizophrenia and personality disorders. I believe that if we go back through that list, which I should have done before this episode, I'm sorry, I had a lot going on that week, guys.
This past week has been a whole year. It's been a hell of a year, guys.
Bro, that wasn't even this past week. It was the week before that when I was dealing with the court.
Valid.
I believe looking in that list of personality disorders and the different variations of schizophrenia,
Okay.
we could find a better category to put her in than the generalized schizophrenia diagnosis that we're getting, because we do have different layers and facets of those. I agree with you. The covering of the break-in. That's weird. Her continuing with that story, her not getting hysterical on the phone until her dad says the cops are coming.
Not even calling the cops herself.
Yes, these are all, but her not calling cops herself is part of what puts her in the psychotic break. Like, so it's, and that's why I know it's so dumb because it's a TV show, but that's why the Mona part sticks in the back of my head. That hyper sense of reality that you can sit in. Man, I don't know. I ain't a doctor. I don't know. It's just, it's so interesting. The fact that we have, most of the time, when we get the schizophrenia by trial and by this, we have paid experts. This is something that has come up afterwards. We have gone through trying to hide it and trying to do this and trying to do that. And obviously we have this option of not guilty by reason of insanity.
Yeah.
And we get here and these are, you know, there's the exceptions and not the rules. And there's the rules. So I don't know where she sits. Obviously, there is something up with Sydney. We do have something going on. The fact that the meds that they put her on helped her.
But those meds could also ultimately be covering whatever is actually wrong with her. And they're just like, well, it's fixing her, so she's obviously schizophrenic, when it could be BPD. It could be some type of bipolar. And thankfully, Elizabeth is forcing her to take these meds, because that's the only way you're going to figure out if it's going to help or not.
She is not fighting any of this. She is not.
Good.
I mean, she has from the beginning. You saw her. She was in the states that she was. She did not fight that 72-hour hold. Like, she did all the stuff they needed her to do. She's taking the meds. She is doing everything. And it's just, so I don't really know, like.
This is a hard one.
It is a very hard one. I mean, you have multiple doctors and multiple people, experts in these fields, saying she's not malingering. She is not feigning symptoms. But we're also so used to people trying to fake this.
It's also so hard to get a schizophrenia diagnosis. Even
And she got it out the gate.
Yes.
And she got it out the gate.
Yeah.
With doctors saying she's in a catatonic state and not responding to them. They are diagnosing her. Like, that's how she came in with it. Steve isn't there, and Elizabeth wasn't allowed to see her at the hospital. Yeah. Elizabeth even talks about that. They sent her to the wrong hospital, actually.
Also, sorry, this just really upset me thinking about it. Of course, women don't get diagnosed with schizophrenia until their early 20s because they are legally not allowed to diagnose schizophrenia until you are 18. You can get pre-diagnosed with symptoms, but legally they are not allowed to diagnose schizophrenia until you're over 18. So she's 19, 20 at this time. Wow, okay. But what caused this psychotic break of hers to the fact that the previous, let's go 4 or 5 months before, her grades start slipping.
Yeah, and so that's why I want to know what happened.
Yeah.
At the end of summer, going back to school. There's something in there that's missing. Because that is where everything changes. What happened over that summer? What's up? But she's also 19, almost 20. This is when this starts to kick in. We talked about before, that family of those boys, that their schizophrenia, or their multiple personalities, 1 and 2, it just, like, the first one triggered at 25, and then the next one triggered at 22, and then the other one was 17, and it just kept getting lower.
Yeah.
And so, and the thing is that all of her psychologists and the stuff on the defense, they were like, early 20s, early mid-20s is how it sits in. The prosecution is all mid to late 20s is when it does. We can't diagnose her yet. She's not old enough. And I was like,
no.
Stop. No. Like, that's where I was like, really? That's not when this gets diagnosed, but you were automatically telling her she's malingering.
My other issue is the sheer fact that she kept repeating, "Get out of my house." Where did that come from? Why is that what's stuck in her head? And I guarantee Mom probably said something along those lines. Maybe.
But
I can't see her doing
it with her walking up and down the stairs, saying, like, telling her she needs to leave, she needs to get out of here, she needs to leave, she needs to get out of here.
That's fair.
So, like,
I don't know. Something happened. It wasn't just, her grades didn't just start slipping.
No,
something happened.
And nobody's focusing on that. I don't know what happened, but when she went back to school. But yeah, there's also a Oxygen Snapped episode on this. You should go watch it because it has Steve is super in it, and Elizabeth, like, a lot from the family and how they're talking, and just a lot. It's Steve has a pretty big hand in this. So,
with that, then also she has a younger brother. At this point, maybe it's going to be best for you to start checking in on him.
Yeah.
If there's no family history of any type of mental issues like that, and it just randomly starts in one person one day, and she, like I said, violently murders her mom, something's wrong. Something's not right.
Yes, and that is why I'm like, do you see why this is... It's crazy because you're like, there's no way she's schizophrenic, but then you're like, well, but something happened because it doesn't make sense without it. I don't think she's, in a blanket statement, schizophrenic. Yeah. I think that we are somewhere in those personality or a schizophrenic thing, or what you're saying. They are treating her with meds, that one of those meds is treating something else that they don't know. But Sydney did not bring up schizophrenia. Steve did not bring up schizophrenia. Elizabeth did not bring up schizophrenia. The doctors did. This happened before Steve ever got to them, remember? He posted bail. She was on 72 hours. She never left that hospital.
The thing is also, if they want to prove a schizophrenic, like that she is schizophrenic, one, hold her in a facility for a while without the meds. Like, I know that sucks, but it's going to be a controlled environment where you can determine, is she actually having schizophrenic symptoms? And she was in a hospital for 2 weeks and then stuck in lockdown for 3 years.
Yeah.
Automatically being put on medication.
And medicated the whole time and adjusting and doing all that. No, I agree with you. And yeah, this is just a really interesting one. Yeah. It's because there's so much to it. And I was really excited to talk to you about it fully. And
I think like, if the defense, since she's getting a new trial, it's gonna fucking suck. But I think maybe putting her in a controlled environment without medication to determine if she's actually having those symptoms outside of a psychotic break
Yeah.
is going to determine what she may or may not actually have.
Yeah.
Are they going to do it? Probably not, because they have essentially having their granddaughter back. But for her well-being, it might be beneficial.
Yeah, and so this all just happened, so obviously
Who knows?
we're going to keep you updated as things come out with this.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is like, so...
I mean, clearly I'm very passionate about insanity pleas because there's so much behind it, and like, I understand we're just now finally dipping our fucking toes into the mental side of criminal justice.
Yeah.
Because, you know, people don't want to believe anyone has anything mentally wrong with them, and that sucks. But
like I said before we started this episode, I told you I might have one of those ones that, because we are so used to arguing a schizophrenia diagnosis, that you can't believe one when you see one, because it looks too generic, it looks too basic. It's not this TV cinematic overhyped what we believe schizophrenia is. And so when we see it in such a simplistic version, or a version that doesn't check off all of our boxes, we don't want to believe it. So like, this is hard because it's so hard to believe a schizophrenia diagnosis.
I mean, I totally see what you're saying with the whole Mona thing. Like, we're such Pretty Little Liar lovers, but
it's what I thought of.
The thing is, for my mind though, like, Mona's so calculated.
It was
different.
But yeah, that's why I said it's different. It's not cinematic. I'm just saying the hyper, like, the reality. Like, that's just the best way to explain to you why she kept going to classes, why she kept using her key card, why she kept telling the dean, no, it's fine, I'm okay, why she took that meeting so well.
And also...
Because nothing else explains that.
I've met multiple schizophrenic people. I literally did studies on this in school. And like, most schizophrenic people don't have a good support system behind them. And if they do, they're not accepting that help because they can handle it themselves, quote unquote. And like, most of them don't want this help. Most of them don't take responsibility for their actions, especially hurting someone in any way, shape, or form, because they don't realize what they're doing. They have other people in their heads having this. So most of the time, they don't have good support systems, or people try to support them, and they just tell them to fuck off, essentially, and that's that. So the fact that, 1, she has accepted what she has done. 2, she is continuously doing her medication and trying to get through this and everything is so rare for a schizophrenic person.
Yes. I agree with that.
I don't know.
But her medicine regimen is forced. So.
Valid.
We can't really say that she's voluntary on that because we don't really know. Like, I'm willing to bet she is, but like also at the same time it's ordered at that point. No, I agree. I'm not disputing these things. But she does have a support system.
A good one at that.
A good ass one.
I
was making that face because when you were like, they don't want help. They're not going to tell anybody. They're doing it. Like, I know she did that for months before, but also they don't want help afterwards and to straighten this out and get this straightened out, which is why the defense was focusing so heavy on the fact that at the time, yes, she has this, but she had a psychotic break. So now she can appreciate it, but I get it. It's very hard. It's a very in between. And usually it's really easy to tell when they're lying in this.
Yeah. And also, poor Steve and his family and Liz might be in denial. I don't know.
It's a hard one. Okay, so it's time for my favorite part of the episode. Let's talk about how amazing Brenda was.
Okay.
And the legacy she left behind.
Please.
First up, the Brenda Powell Foundation was established at the Akron, Ohio Children's Hospital in honor of Brenda. The purpose of the Brenda K. Powell Memorial Scholarship is to provide one or more, depending on the funding, scholarships annually to a graduating high school senior or has been a hematology or oncology patient at the Children's Hospital and is seeking additional education, college, or vocational training. Scholarships will be awarded based on a blinded review of prompted essays submitted by patients.
Nice.
Yeah, so
Also, I
basically...
hated writing essays. Those were
Oh,
the
I was so
worst.
good at that.
Oh, absolutely. They have it easy with ChatGPT now, let me tell you.
Except for they're having systems to check that.
Good thing you ain't in school no more.
I don't know.
Go on.
Brenda was so incredibly loved by her coworkers that she spent her entire 28-year career with them, and the hospital was her second home, and her patients were her second family. She watched them grow and achieve their dreams. So many of them left wonderful memories of Brenda on her GoFundMe page and Obituary, and she was just truly a one-of-a-kind human. So many of her patients came out to remember her and say something about her and how they helped her and was always there for her. Steve remembers Brenda's smile the most. She had the cutest little sarcastic smile that she would throw up at him constantly. It's kind of how she got him.
I mean, period.
Everyone loved Brenda. She was kind and caring, and she made you feel like family instantly. I wish we could have met Brenda. I think she would have liked us.
Probably. Who wouldn't like us?
I mean...
A lot of people.
But yeah. Brenda was pretty awesome. She did a lot.
I can't even imagine how Steve feels.
I can't.
The guilt that man must carry around with him, knowing he was just there, just saw her.
And left because he knew Brenda was coming home and everything would be fine.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
So, college is a great bridge between being a teen and being an adult. You're out on your own, but not really on your own because you have a whole campus. Even the most mature and well-adjusted teens can have a hard time adjusting to college life. That's why all college campuses have a free mental health clinic. It can look different for each college, but you should be able to find info for your college on campus or online. If you're struggling or feeling overwhelmed, don't hesitate to find help or reach out to someone to get help. Also, traditional university is not everyone's style. It definitely was not mine. I knew I would party, and I knew I wasn't going to go to class if I was trusted with that much freedom and that much responsibility. And I wasn't, like, I would have been just turning 18, like, as I went to college.
We love
as
a
an
self-aware queen.
So, my parents did not like that explanation of why I chose to go to a trade school, which is just acceptable of an option as a traditional university.
Absolutely.
Or online college, community college, no college. All of these are perfectly acceptable life choices after high school.
Absolutely. You do not have to live a traditional life.
No.
Like it's made out to be.
You are not expected to step up to society's expectations of going to college. You're not lesser if you don't go to college. You're not smart if you don't, like, you're not smart if you don't go to college. Mm-hmm. Like, there's so many other options.
Yes.
And I just really want to put that out because I'm a huge advocate for trade school. Huge advocate for it. And, yeah. Is there anything else you want to add on that?
Military is always a good option, too. I'm not meaning that in a mean way whatsoever, but some people just have bettered their lives so much with the military.
Oh, yeah.
I've personally seen it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even like telling myself what to do, so that was not an option for me.
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not.
I don't even
I'm
like
not a fan.
Like, somebody asked me if I was going to go in the military in high school, and I looked at them and I was like, I don't even like it when my dad yells at me and tells me what to do, so how about no?
Yes. Like,
and I don't...
Whatever you decide to do for yourself, don't compare what you do to what someone else decided to do. Life is different for everyone.
Yep.
And you are not a lesser person because someone else may have something different that you don't.
And your mental health is way, way, way more important than keeping up with the rest of society and their standards and expectations.
Absolutely. Fuck society. Fuck the man.
Damn straight. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode. If you like what you have heard here today, as chaotic as it could have been,
I don't rant as much as I did today. I ranted a lot.
I knew she was going to rant a lot in this episode. I was prepared for
I'm very
it.
passionate about certain things. This
She
is one of
is.
them.
But if you liked us today, or every time you listen to us, hit that like, follow, subscribe button wherever you're listening, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. And if you're not already following us
Audible.
on social media... Oh, yeah, we're on Audible, too.
Audible. What was that?
I don't know. We're on everything.
We are.
TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify, Audible, Apple,
iHeartRadio.
We're
literally
YouTube.
everywhere.
We're everywhere. You can't get rid of us. So go ahead and make sure you're liking and following us. We post things up different places, sneak peeks, bloopers. We got a few good bloopers today.
Yes, we did. I do want to throw this out there also. At this point, by the time you're hearing this, we have probably gotten back on track of taking care of TikToks, posting more social media stuff. I had a small breakdown myself, so I had to take a step away from
Tickety tax?
From some stuff. But if you are still around and you're still listening to us, thank you. Thank you for making us feel seen and loved, and we appreciate you guys. And of course, welcome to all of our new followers, subscribers, listeners. We're happy you're here. We love you.
Yes, welcome. We've gained quite a few of them lately.
I love it. Also, all of the comments make me giggle.
Oh my gosh, yes. And also, we love it when y'all argue amongst yourselves in the comments about theories and things happening. We love it.
Some of those theories, though, like, it's not something I thought about, and I was just like, oh.
We don't always engage on those ones, but just know we're reading
it.
it.
We read them.
We read it, so keep going.
Yeah.
Also, head over to our website,
Yes.
justice4podcast.com, if you haven't already. You can submit a case. So something you want to know more about, you don't feel like doing research on, it's your cousin, and you just want someone to hear about it, let us know. You can submit them over there.
Or you can submit stuff that you're just like, hey, I saw a random TikTok on. I want you guys to do the research on. And then you send us into a depressive spiral. I still did it. Here we are.
But here we are.
But no, we really love it. We genuinely love when you guys submit cases to us, because most of these I've never heard of before.
Oh, yeah, and it's great because we're diving into something brand new.
Absolutely. And it's great. Please don't forget, February is also
Teen Dating Violence Awareness Month.
Yes. So, hopefully you wore your orange on the 11th, and if not, that's fine.
You can wear orange another day of this month.
Yeah.
Head over to our Facebook or our Instagram. We have a lot of information that's been coming out this month about it. We are joining Respect is Love and using the hashtag this year for their campaign is hashtag Respect That.
Yep.
So go ahead and use that this month and find out ways that you can locally help with these organizations.
Absolutely. But also on our website, you can find many other resources, all of our episodes, and submitting cases.
Yeah, that's all I got. What you got?
I got nothing. Thanks for joining us today, you guys. We will see you next week for another full-length episode, and we'll catch you then. Okay, love you. Bye.